The masters of Chambord in the area were all angry. Also, the envoys and guests from other kingdoms and empires wanted to know how Chambord was going to deal with these Mooncieles elites who were now captives. In fact, there were so many Mooncieles elite here that it was beyond strange. If Chambord were able to somehow bring them into its force, the power of Chambord would grow into an even more terrifying level. Fei sneered and waved his hand, and a golden sword energy came out of his fingers and dashed forward. Whoosh! 3 heads flew into the air. Desav and his 2 peers couldn't believe it. Until that sword energy actually killed them, they didn't think that the king of Chambord dared to touch them without even giving an excuse. After all, they were holy knights who were known in the northern regional church. As blood gushed into the air, the 3 corpses collapsed onto the ground. Butcher! The envoys and guests who were sitting in the VIP areas shivered in fear, and their faces changed color. Since the king of Chambord even dared to kill the Mooncieles holy knights of the Holy Church, who wouldn't he dare to kill? It would be too terrifying to trigger and offend someone like this king. The other Mooncieles elites of the Dragon Hunt Alliance sensed a chill coming up their spines and right into their skulls, and they felt like they were placed in a freezer. Immediately, people started to kneel and beg for mercy ashen-faced. Honorable Lord, Supreme King Alexander of Chambord, please forgive me. I was tricked by them and came here without knowledge. I'm willing to serve the Chambord kingdom and fight for your majesty. Please show mercy. Fei shook his head and said, execute. Then short white-haired Pierce stood out and raised his arm. Saint's sword Excalibur dashed down, and then a head rolled on the ground. People in the Dragon Hunt Alliance saw this scene, and some people got another idea. One of them stood up and shouted, King of Chambord, kill me if you want. I'm a Mooncieles elite, and I have my dignity. I will never kneel and surrender to my enemies. Ha ha ha. On the path of cultivation, losing means death. Today, even if I die, I won't regret dying in the hands of true masters. What this person said was honorable and master-like. A lot of people around him were surprised, and some of them got a better impression of him. This is the true presence and dignity of a Mooncieles elite, they thought. Just when everyone thought that the king of Chambord would pardon this person and recruit him for being such an honorable master, Fei sneered and shook his head. Execute! Pierce raised his arm, and Saint's sword Excalibur appeared again. Suddenly a terrified expression appeared on this Mooncieles elite's face. Before he could beg for forgiveness, he was already killed without mercy. Then, Fei glanced at the rest of the Mooncieles elites who were still alive. His stare wasn't sharp, but it wasn't indecisive and troubled as well. After a short pause, Fei said calmly, Since you guys came to Chambord with the intent of killing and robbing, I don't think you would have let go of my citizens if Chambord lost the battle tonight. All actions have consequences, and you should have thought about this beforehand. People die of greed. Don't blame me for being cruel and inhumane. Today, I'm going to borrow your heads and tell those bandits, who are still looking at Chambord with greed, the consequences of messing with us. After that was said, the Mooncieles elites knew that they couldn't survive through the night. Some people cussed, some people stated their ties and threatened, some people turned ashen-faced, some people begged and shivered, and some people tried to break free. All of that was useless. Execute! As Fei commanded sharply without hesitation, Pierce and other Saint Seiyas of Chambord all dropped their blades. Heads rolled on the ground like watermelons, and more than a dozen Mooncieles elites were killed without a single one of them being spared. Witnessing this scene, the outsiders who were seated in the southern, eastern, and western areas on the square shivered even more. The way they looked at the king of Chambord and the Chambordians changed, and they were in fear. They all swore in their minds that they wouldn't try to get on the wrong side of Chambord. These savages in the north are too violent, too ferocious, and too terrifying, they thought. Soon, Chambordians moved the corpses away, and the mages of Chambord used water elemental magic spells to clean the area. Fei sighed in his mind slightly. 1 year ago, when he was canonized on the peak of the East Mountain of Chambord, It turned into a BLODY battle, and his crown was stained by blood. Today, a similar BLODY battle broke out during his wedding. This was a continent ruled by the law of the jungle, the survival of the fittest. Being nice to people and merciful on this continent without absolute power was a joke. As long as someone was weak, he or she would be dominated by others. Didn't matter who nice or friendly they were. For a moment, the atmosphere on the square was tranquil. Suddenly, a series of fast, clip-clopping noises sounded and broke the silence. People turned their heads, and they saw a man in tight-fit yellow clothes dashing through the street on a horse. He was pushing the horse to its absolute peak performance with an anxious expression on his face. Right now, the outside and the inside of Chambord City must be guarded tightly. This man wasn't that powerful, but he was able to dash in the city without restrictions and reach Tiananmen Square. The only explanation for this was that this man in yellow was a member of Chambord. Just from the anxious look on this man's face, one could tell that something big was taking place. Chambord just obtained this historic and legendary victory. What could be happening? People thought. Everyone got curious. After this man in yellow got to the exterior of Tiananmen Square in a flash, he showed no sign of slowing down. He was going to charge into the wedding ceremony of the king. The bylaw enforcement officers who were guarding the venue were about to stop him. But this man raised his hand and showed a palm-sized token that had the two-headed dog, an axe, and a sword on it. It had a red glow, and it was the token granted by the king. Seeing this, all the bylaw enforcement officers moved away, making a path for him. This man in yellow wasn't blocked, and he got to the throne which was located in the northern area on the square. Your Majesty, capital. Something big is happening in the capital. This man in yellow jumped off his horse, and he was panting heavily. When he walked and staggered, people finally noticed that this man's inner thighs and BUTT were all below DY. It was clear that he didn't rest and rode the horse all the way from St. Petersburg back to Chambord. That was how the skin on his lower body got essentially rubbed off. Before he could finish speaking, he pulled out a letter and fainted. Just then, a long, sad whine sounded. The yellow horse that this man was riding on collapsed onto the ground with white foams coming out of its mouth. Even though wind elemental magic arrays were still flashing in its legs, its body twitched, and it looked like this horse couldn't live anymore. Everyone was stunned. A handsome horse that was empowered by wind elemental magic arrays died from running, and an experienced rider set out from exhaustion. What was going on? What was so urgent? Fei's expression turned serious. He recognized this man in yellow. He was a member of Chambord's intelligence network, Letter Office. Due to the battle tonight, Fei had to summon military leader of Rogue Encampment, Xianxia, so the Letter Office couldn't use her to deliver messages to Fei through the magic teleportation portals. Therefore, they had to send their best rider and fastest horse to Pas on the message from St. Petersburg, which was very far away. Something big must have happened. Otherwise, Modric, who is very steady and calm, wouldn't be so anxious and give this order, Fei thought. After getting the magic letter from this man's hand, Fei signaled Torres and asked him to take this man in yellow away for healing. With everyone's eyes on him, Fei opened the letter and quickly read it. As soon as he started reading it, his expression changed. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, he raised his hand and sent the letter flying to Second Prince Dominguez, who was sitting in the VIP area. With a confused expression, Dominguez looked at Fei and then read the letter. In the next moment, this prince, who was always calm and collected, was shocked. With the letter in his hands, he shivered uncontrollably, and an anxious and mad expression appeared on his face. This scene made all the people around him curious. What happened? Why are both the King of Chambord and Prince Dominguez so stunned? They thought. After reading the letter, Dominguez said the letter to two of his core followers, Demonic Woman Paris and Red Beard Granello. As soon as they finished reading the letter, their expressions turned ugly as if they learned something unbelievable. In the next moment, they both looked at the King of Chambord, who was sitting on his throne. Dominguez walked out of the VIP area and went to face Fei. After a moment of pause, he organized his words and asked as he stared at Fei in the eyes, Alexander, Would Chambord ignore this situation? People were confused as to why this prince asked this question. However, Faye nodded and said, Chambord is a member of Zenith, so we won't just stay here and watch. However, it isn't the right time for Chambord to get involved. Second Prince Dominguez stared at Faye in his eyes as if he wanted to read some of Faye's thoughts. A few seconds passed, it said, and he nodded and replied, Okay, I believe you. As a friend, I believe that you will make the correct decision. After that, this handsome prince instantly turned around and walked to the other people who came to Chambord with him. He commanded, Everyone in the envoy group, get ready. Ditch all heavy items and only pack the essentials. We are leaving in 10 minutes, and we need to return to St. Petersburg as soon as we can. Then this group of people quickly left. Alexander, I hope that we can still meet again in this life. Before she left, Paris, who was really alluring, turned around and looked at Faye with a complicated expression, and her tone sounded pessimistic and sad even though she had a smile on her face. After that, she left with the other people quickly. Looks like something huge happened in the capital of Zenith. What happened? Could it be that Emperor Yadates.Sin, who is rumored to be dying, finally died? Did all the injuries in his body and the corrosion of time kill him? That is probably the only thing that would get Second Prince Dominguez of Zenith this anxious. It is well known that these two princes are fighting for the throne fiercely. As soon as Emperor Yadates dies, the battle for the throne would be over. The people who were cleverer already started to guess and make assumptions. Who would the king of Chambord support? A while ago, the king of Chambord and the crown prince of Zenith almost battled each other. Right now, they aren't in a good relationship. Second Prince Dominguez is probably in a great spot. Also, Crown Prince Arshavin is unlucky for becoming an enemy of the king of Chambord. If he knows about the strength that Chambord showcased tonight, he will regret it so much that his stomach might turn green. Just as people continued to speculate, the king of Chambord suddenly stood up from his chair, looked around and said, The wedding ceremony will end here. Thank you all for coming from so far away and congratulating me. I'm very thankful, and I hope that you can all stay in Chambord for a few more days. I have prepared some presents, and I hope that you can bring them back to your kings and emperors respectively. I sincerely hope that the friendships that Chambord has with you all last forever. With that said, Faye left Tiananmen Square with a bunch of masters of Chambord. Even though the envoys and guests were really curious, they didn't dare to ask any questions. They all stood up, congratulated Faye one more time, and left quickly. The darkness enveloped Tiananmen Square, which just went through a historic battle, and Chambord City fell into silence. Faye left with the masters and officials in a hurry. Even though the Chambordians were all curious, they didn't want to disturb the king, who was in deep thought. Drogba and Pierce, who were simple-minded, couldn't hold back the urge and murmured with each other. They were feeling very ticklish about this situation. When they reached the former king's palace, which was the current administrative center of Chambord, Faye turned around and said to everyone, Notify all the high-level officials as well as the elite students who are about to graduate from civil and military university. We need to meet in the number 1 meeting room at the City of Heroes. Suddenly, Faye thought of something and corrected himself with a smile. Never mind. You guys are all tired from what happened. You should all get a good night rest, and the bylaw enforcement officers need to work a bit harder and patrol the city. Also, send out scouts to keep eyes on the area of 50 kilometers around the city. Report to me if anything happens. In terms of the meeting, let's do tomorrow morning. Ha ha ha. Tonight is my wedding, and I shouldn't waste time on these boring matters. After that, he said to Xianxia, I'm afraid that I have to trouble you to communicate with the people at the capital. Please tell Modric to keep all the members of the letter office in secrecy. Reserve the strength and wait for further commands. Kasia nodded and walked to Elena. This most powerful master of the rogue encampment, who rarely spoke or showed emotions, smiled and patted Elena's shoulder intimately. As she looked at this flower of rogue, who was like her own daughter, she opened her mouth and wanted to say something. However, she ended up not saying anything, and she turned around and walked into the portal that she created with a gentle smile, instantly disappearing. Faye smiled and was about to say something, but he suddenly sensed a unique aura. His face changed color, and he shut his mouth. He looked up at the night sky in the south direction, and it looked like he was waiting for something to appear. He was so taken that it looked like he was possessed. Everyone was confused. Just as they were about to ask questions, Moonsieleda's elites such as Lampard were all shocked and looked up at the sky as well. After about 3 minutes, even regular star-level warrior and mages were able to sense a great amount of energy coming over from the south direction. Something powerful and quick was dashing over in the sky, and it felt like a god was descending from heaven. What is that? Everyone was surprised. This aura wasn't from a living being. Instead, it felt like a huge magic array was moving in the sky. It was beyond strange. After dozens of seconds, Posset said. Faye's expression suddenly changed. It looked like he was stunned. He waved his hand, and the masters of Chambord instantly understood what he meant. They formed a defense formation and protected Angela in the middle since she didn't know any combat techniques. In the next moment, a huge shadow enveloped in flashing green and black lights slowly showed itself in the southern sky. That is, everyone gasped, and they couldn't utter a word. It felt like they were struck by lightning. A huge barge appeared in the nightly sky. It was a battle barge that was flying in the sky. This battle barge was about 500 meters long and 200 meters wide, and it was all black. The black sails on this barge were fluttering in the air like crazy, looking like huge blades that were going to tear up the sky. Also, all kinds of mysterious magic runes were engraved on the barge, flashing green and black lights. There were clouds of light green wind elemental magic energy swirling below the barge, lifting this huge structure in the air and moving it toward the direction of Chambord. It was a terrifying product of a magic civilization. Faye was completely shocked. This was the most unbelievable magic product he had ever seen after he came to the Azeroth continent. A mysterious battle barge that could float and move in the sky was more powerful than the planes on Earth. In fact, it reminded him of the helicarrier in Marvel Comics. It made him feel like he was dreaming. The reverse whale battleship, King Alexander, was a mimic of a battleship from the mythical era. Since it was built using the techniques of the magic civilization, it could sail on the river but also seal itself and submerge underwater like submarines. It made Faye quite proud. However, comparing reverse whale battleship with this floating battle barge, it was way too inferior. Not only Faye, but all the people around him such as Czech and Drogba were all stunned. It was their first time seeing such a magnificent sky fortress. It is a Xianxia. It is a Xianxia from the Ormond Empire. Why is something like this here? Strategist and advisor Old Ariang, who was silent all this time, suddenly gasped. As a complicated expression appeared on his face, his body shivered violently. No one knew if it were due to fear or anger. Sunji, Faye thought of something and asked. Old Ariang nodded and said slowly, "That is right. The Ormond Empire, a level 7 empire, has flying battle barges named Xianxia. They are made from a unique wood material called ironwood. These ironwoods are black and look like metal. However, they are tougher than iron but lighter than wood. In addition, they have great magic conductivity and are specialties of the Ormond Empire. After several generations of talents and geniuses, the Empire created the huge flying battle barges that we are seeing today. They are named Xianxia, and they are flying fortresses that the Ormond Empire relies on to be a superpower. In several big wars, they helped the Empire out and destroyed its enemies. They are true rulers of the sky." After hearing the explanation, the people in the area finally understood the origin of this huge black flying barge. The Ormond Empire? Level 7? Faye frowned and thought. The Zenith Empire is only a small level 1 empire, and the Leon Empire, which dominates in the region of 500,000 kilometers around Zenith, is only a level 6 empire. That means this Xianxia might be from 1 million kilometers away. They are up to no good. Hee. Damn it. We don't give a fuck about the Ormond Empire and this damn Xianxia. How dare they be so arrogant in the territory of Chambord? Your Majesty, Let me go and take control of it. It will be a gift to your majesty and the two highnesses. In the future, your majesty can ride it around and show off. Ha ha! Drogba rubbed his chin and laughed, and he and Pierce asked Faye for permission to attack that barge. Don't underestimate this Xianxia. 500 meters long. It can be the main force in a Xianxia legion. 1 to 2 Moonseal's elites won't be able to take it down. Old Aryang was afraid that Faye might underestimate the enemy, so he quickly tried to stop Drogba and Pierce. Faye looked at Old Aryang and thought, this strategist of mine has stories of his own. He is very familiar with the Ormond Empire, so he probably has a lot of connections with it. As the Chambordians talked among each other, that huge Xianxia already arrived at the outskirts of Chambord City. At this moment, signal-like red lights flashed on the Xianxia, and the black sails all lowered. This battle barge stopped moving, and it floated in the sky like a huge mountain, giving off a suffocating pressure. Lights dashed out of Faye's eyes, and he was able to clearly see that the Xianxia was indeed like an aircraft carrier that was flying in the sky. On the deck, many people were running around and looked busy. Since they were far away, they looked at ants at the moment. There were at least 400 to 500 people on the deck, and they were organized well and doing their job, controlling this huge battle fortress in the air. Faye waved his hand and signaled. Whoosh! His guard, Torres, pulled out his bow and shot out a fire arrow. People on the Xianxia, stand out and answer the question. Why are you in the territory of Chambord without any permission? The abundant warrior energy empowered Torres' voice, and it sounded as loud as thunder, resonating in the sky. At the same time, all the Dragonslayer crossbows turned around in the fortresses of Chambord on the ground, and the huge arrows targeted the Xianxia in the sky, being alerted to the full degree. However, it was completely silent on the Xianxia. Only a series of red lights flashed. This Xianxia is charging up its magic cannon at the front of the barge. It is about to attack. Old Aryang was suddenly shocked. However, before he could finish, a cloud of orange lights appeared at the front of the barge, as if it were SCCU.mulating energy. Then, the barge shivered as if a beast in HLL was screaming, and a beam of fire that had a diameter of more than 10 meters shot out of the front of the barge and came crashing down at the defense wall of Chambord in silence. Before the Chambordians could react, a series of booming noises sounded, and the ground shook violently as if there was an earthquake. Then, a portion of the defense wall that was longer than 40 meters collapsed like a sand sculpture. Even though magic arrays empowered it, it was turned into ruins. Such an attack speed. In just a flash, the defense wall of Chambord City was opened. Even though Chambord was dominant at the moment, they weren't able to react in time and save the situation. Damn it! There are our brothers on the defense wall. Pierce and Drogba were shocked, and they roared and dashed toward the portion of the defense wall that was destroyed. Get the fuck down! Seeing the ruins, Oleg's eyes instantly turned red. Ever since the inception of the bylaw enforcement force, it had never been harmed this much before. This fatty who was very angry overlooked all rules. Fuck this level 7 Ormond Empire. Fuck this Xianxia. Fuck them. As he roared, his earth elemental warrior energy exploded, and the huge hammer in his hand dashed out before Faye's command. The huge hammer struck toward the Xianxia in the air, and it drew a yellow crack-like mark in the dark sky. The metal chain that connected the hammer to Oleg's arms extended out as if it were limitless, and it looked like a huge python that was charging at that Xianxia. When angered, this flatterer actually exploded and used the strength that was equivalent to level 1 mid-tier new moon. This level of elevation even surprised Faye a little, and the king thought, this flatterer's power during a rage isn't bad. Should I anger this fatty regularly? It might help him increase his strength by a lot. The huge hammer struck at the Xianxia like a meteor. Boom! A loud noise resonated in the air, and that Xianxia, which could be the main force of a legion, shivered. The Chambordians observed this carefully. When the hammer was about 20 meters away from the Xianxia, a layer of green lights suddenly appeared. A lot of magic arrays on the ship started to flash and shine, and the energy sphere that they produced blocked Oleg's hammer strike, which could be counted as his peak performance. Open up! This fatty who was in a frenzy roared, and he appeared to be even more ferocious than Drogba and Pierce. His colossal body slowly raised into the sky, and he swung the hammer using the chain, making a huge orange light disc appear since this hammer was being swung so fast. As the metal chain collided and made a series of tinkling noises, the hammer struck the Xianxia again and again. Boom! A series of rumbling noises sounded in the sky again. Under the continuous attacks, the body of the battle barge started to shake. Even though Oleg's hammer didn't break the energy sphere outside the barge, it made its body shake violently. The magic cannon at the front of the barge lit up again, and a cloud of red energy appeared. This cloud of energy continued to change shape, and it was clear that it couldn't stabilize the energy and shoot out another beam of fire to attack. "You're low-life natives. How dare a bunch of fireflies competes with the moon in the sky? Fuck off!" An arrogant voice sounded, and the shout almost shattered the sky. Then, a dash of brilliant sword energy chopped down from the Xianxia. This sword energy was so shiny that it looked like a star, and it felt like the power contained in it was able to push over anything in this world. Such power wasn't something that Oleg could stop. Sensing this acute danger, the fatty was quickly woken up from his state of frenzy by a chill that was shooting up his spine. His bravery instantly disappeared. As he screamed, he quickly tried to shrink his shivering body and hid behind his huge black hammer. Boom! That sword energy struck onto the huge hammer, but the stars in the sky suddenly shone brightly. The golden starlight showed and displayed the image of a huge crab in the sky, and the starlight shined down, empowering this hammer. Then, this fatty and his huge hammer were both struck down from the sky and fell like a meteor. Faye was planning to rescue this flatterer, but he paused after seeing this. As the gold saint of Cancer, Oleg borrowed the star power at that critical moment and saved himself. However, that brilliant sword energy made Faye feel a little familiar. He felt like he had seen this sword technique from somewhere before, but he couldn't pinpoint the exact time and location. "Elena, protect Angela and return to 5-Sword Sky Mountain. Pass us my order. Initiate the city defensive magic array. Strategist Ariang and Robin can stay, and everyone else, go and rescue the injured Chambordians." After observing for a little while, Faye already got a rough estimation of this Xianxia. Therefore, he quickly made a plan. Elena nodded and replied, "Alexander, be careful." Then, she held onto Angela's waist, and they turned into a dash of blue light and disappeared into the back mountains of Chambord. The warriors of Chambord, such as Czech and Torres, all took the orders. They dashed toward the collapsed area of the defense wall and tried to rescue the bylaw enforcement officers who were buried under the rocks. At this moment, the Xianxia in the sky suddenly made a move. A series of red lights flashed at the front of the barge, and its body shivered again. A thick beam of energy shot toward the collapsed area of the defense wall, and the barge moved back a little due to the ma.s.civ thrusting force of this beam. Faye quickly raised his fist. Golden energy flames suddenly appeared, and the bright golden fist mark flew into the sky, completely colliding into this beam of energy that was shot from that magic cannon. Boom! As if the sun exploded in midair, the terrifying flames and energy dispersed into the area, and the bright lights hurt the eyes of the people who were looking at this explosion. Felt like it was doomsday, and it was horrifying. Faye's punch was perfect and blocked that beam of energy. Only the king, who was the most powerful person at Chambord, dared to do something like this. If it were anyone else who slightly missed this beam of energy by a tiny bit, an area in Chambord City would be destroyed, and many casualties would arise. This was able to buy a few minutes, and waves of blue magic energy appeared in the city. Soon, a blue half-sphere appeared above the city, enveloping the city like an upside-down bowl. It looked like water was flowing on this energy sphere, and it protected Chambord in all directions. Bam! 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 Almost at the same time, the smaller weapons on the two sides of the Xianxia shot out dashes of blue flames, and these flames crashed down onto this energy sphere. The energies dimpled the surface of the energy sphere, but they couldn't break it open. They are smaller magic cannons. On a Xianxia that is on this level, there would be at least 100 of these kinds of weapons. On both the front and the end of the barge, there would be a huge G.D of war-level magic cannon, and the defense wall collapsed because it was attacked by one of them, old Ariang quickly explained. Strategist, you seem to be very familiar with Xianxia. Do you know how to operate one of these? Fei looked at old Ariang and asked quickly. Yes, but a Xianxia of this size couldn't be operated by a few people. There needs to be at least 50 mages who are above 1 star and more than 100 well-trained workers who can use the mechanics and structures on it. Old Ariang nodded and told Fei everything that he knew. Ha ha ha! Since you know how to operate it, it will be much easier. Our Shamboard is just lacking a little in terms of air force. Fei thought of something and summoned the Throne of Chaos. With Robin and old Ariang on the stairs of the throne, the three of them dashed into the sky and appeared in front of the huge Xianxia. The huge shadow instantly enveloped them. The shocking size comparison was too surreal. Facing the huge Xianxia, the three of them felt like ants. At this moment, red lights started to flash again at the front of the barge. The huge magic cannon was charged up, and a rumbling noise sounded. Another terrifying beam of energy got shot out, and it was clear that the enemies wanted to destroy the defensive magic array of Shamboard this time. Fei sneered and raised his hand. Invincible Emperor Fist. A huge fist mark that was 10 meters in each dimension easily shattered this beam of energy. Damn it. If I don't show you my real strength, you plan to take me as a HEL low kitty. Even though Fei didn't show anything on his face, he was furious since this unknown Xianxia kept on attacking Shamboard City. A silver light flashed by, and the Throne of Chaos said through the green energy sphere that was protecting the Xianxia and appeared near the deck. Now, Fei was able to see what was happening on this Xianxia clearly. On the Xianxia, there were many buildings that looked just like the structures on a Ma.S.Civ battleship. However, they were slightly modified to fit the Xianxia's new layout. There were tall sail poles, big command center, and various other fancy and luxurious structures. On the deck that had many magic runes engravings, hundreds of soldiers in black and yellow armor ran out, sweating as they operated the various mechanisms on the Xianxia. There were also more than a dozen commander-looking people standing around a huge, black cannon at the head of the barge, talking about something. Beside them, there were 10 huge men. They were more than 2 meters tall, and they were bulky like muscle mountains. They were not wearing anything in the upper body, and they were only wearing yellow leather shorts. They also had yellow body hair, and they looked like apes that didn't evolve. They were full of power and looked like beasts, and they were shouting and trying to control this huge black cannon. They were adjusting the position of this cannon and trying to change the angle according to the commander's orders. Beside them, there were 4 fire elemental 7-star mages who continued to inject fire magic energy into the body of the cannon. The fire magic energy flowed into the cannon, activating the magic gems that were inlaid in its body and the base. Once the angle of the cannon was fixed, the magic arrays were going to shoot out another destructive strike. It seemed like none of the enemies expected Chambordians to get through the energy sphere created by the Xianxia. Seeing Fei, old Ariang, and Robin landing on the deck, everyone on the Xianxia was stunned. The first few commanders quickly reacted, and they roared, "Quickly! Capture these natives!" As they shouted, they pulled out their swords, commanding the soldiers around them to charge at Fei like a flood. "Protect your father." After whispering that to Robin, Fei dashed off the Throne of Chaos and charged into the crowd of soldiers. How powerful was Fei? Regular soldiers were no match for him. After he punched out once, a huge amount of force from the thrust smashed forward, instantly destroying the first 20 elite soldiers of the Ormond Empire who were charging at him. Bam! 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 They were all turned into blood mists. With golden energy flames around him, Fei looked magnificent and holy. Like a tiger in a herd of sheep, he was invincible. Every time he moved his body, some enemies would fall off the deck and drop down from the sky like broken kites. Ah! No! Request for the appearance of the Guardians. We need them to kill this native, the soldiers in yellow screamed. A few commanders were shocked to see this. Even though they were all 9-star warriors and could be considered powerful in any empire, they couldn't react in time. They were lightly touched by the golden say-like energy, and their bodies cracked. They were stunned. They thought Fei was a regular Moon-CLA-S elite, and they expected to hold him down for a short period while the masters were on their way. However, Fei's power surprised them and they were terrified. Besides the soldiers, there were archers who were hiding in many positions and shooting sneaky arrows at Fei. However, these magic arrows that could penetrate through the bodies of Moon-CLA-S elites couldn't even get within 20 meters of Fei. The golden energy flames shattered the arrows and turned them into dust. The force even turned some arrows around and shot them back, killing some of the archers instantly. Yuck! Who is a weak bug? Fei laughed as he crushed his enemies in front of him. As he divided the herds of enemies apart by waving his hands, he instantly appeared before the huge magic cannon that was at the front of the Xianxia. With another wave of his hand, 10 sword energies shot out and killed the 10 huge men who were operating the powerful weapon before they could jump at him, cutting them into halves. Those 4 7-star mages just finished chanting their spells, and a sea of fire swamped at Fei, taking the form of many dragons. The scene was scary. However, Fei pushed his palms forward, and the golden energy waves expanded. The roaring fire dragons whined and were forced back, instantly enveloping these 4 mages. After a series of screams, several figures that were covered with flames staggered and fell off the deck. When they were falling, they were also turned into burned corpses. These 4 mages were all 7-star, and they could be counted as masters in the Zenith Empire. However, they were facing Fei, who was a mighty warrior and a cultivation genius. Fei was now already a Sun-CLA-S lord, and he was close to the realm of Geodius. Regular warriors and mages were far away from him. Fei used his power and instantly eliminated the people who were in control of the magic cannon at the front of the barge. He didn't need to worry about Chambord City getting destroyed by the beams of energies anymore. As he laughed, he turned around and dashed into the enemies again. The king was not going to show any mercy toward these enemies at all. They charged into the Chambord kingdom without warning, and they attacked Chambord City cruelly, killing Chambordians and causing the destruction of a part of Chambord's territory. Fei quickly killed more than 100 enemies on the Xianxia. He was going to kill all the enemies on this barge and take it over. Faced with Fei, who was literally invincible amongst the soldiers, these soldiers quickly lost the courage to fight back and fled after 3 to 5 minutes. Not too far away, about 60 people were trying to attack Robin and Old Ariang. However, they were both standing on the throne of chaos, and a semi-transparent silver energy sphere was protecting them. The throne of chaos had absorbed energy from many magic gems before sucking away almost half of the normal mode, World Stone. Even that midget-sized full moon Sin wasn't able to break it open and got injured by the impulsive force, let alone these soldiers who were only on the star level. Seeing this, Fei no longer worried about the two. Instead, he charged toward the command center that was located in the center of the barge as he killed more enemies. Since Fei was planning to take over this Xianxia, he was controlled with his application of force. He only killed enemies and didn't destroy this barge. He got close to the command center, which was under the sail pole in the center of the barge, and he turned the dozens of soldiers who were guarding it into blood mist. In the next second, he already appeared before the stairs that led to the command center. He looked up and saw an ennobly-looking man staring down at him. This man didn't look anxious. Instead, he looked at Fei with mockery and disdain. As Fei sneered and was about to attack, something happened. Suddenly, a brilliant sword energy shot down from the command center. This sword energy was so quick that Fei didn't even sense when it was cast. With a unique demonic aura, it came crashing down on Fei. If anyone else were here, they could have felt like they were defeated by this sword energy already before it got to them. That was how terrifying this sword energy was to the mind. Ha ha ha! I have been waiting for you. A similar sword energy had defeated Oleg the Flatterer. Even though it was quick and fast, it still left a deep impression on Fei's mind. Therefore, ever since Fei set his foot on this Xianxia, he had his guard up, and he was prepared for this sword master to strike at him. As he laughed, Fei raised his fist, and a golden fist mark dashed out and collided with this sword energy. Bam! The golden and silver energies exploded, and residual energy spilled in all directions. Fei's face changed color. There was something strange about this sword energy. Even though the sword energy was destroyed, a hidden and lethal energy somehow still got through Fei's golden energy flames and struck toward his throat. This energy was hidden, vicious, and yet pure. Its quality was beyond the realm of Xianxia, and it felt like it was a forbidden power that shouldn't exist in this realm. Fei was forced back multiple steps, and he reached out his hands. Immortal King's Stone Crusher. With a swing of the hammer, it could even change the weather. This war hammer that was rumored to be able to destroy everything in the world easily crushed this streak of forbidden energy. However, before Fei could react and counterattack, waves of silver sword energies dashed at him like continuous waves. Their speed was fast too. As Fei waved his hammer, he slowly backed off and shattered all the sword energies. The situation was really dangerous. Fei felt like he was tightrope walking on a cliff. If he did anything wrong, the hidden forbidden energies inside the sword energies would strike him. In just a few seconds, Fei was already forced back to the head of the barge. However, the demonic sword energies continued to attack him like there was no tomorrow. In the end, Fei was forced out of the Xianxia and exited the green energy sphere around the barge. By then, the continuous sword energies finally stopped. Seeing this mythical and legendary level battle, the people on the Xianxia and in Chambord City were all stunned. Inside the hotels and various temporary residences, the envoys and guests from nearby empires and kingdoms looked at the huge Xianxia in the air and insane battle, and they couldn't hold back their shock. Who is this person? This person can pressure the king of Chambord, who is a powerful warrior, to this degree. At this moment, the envoy group from Zenit hadn't left Chambord City yet. As Second Prince Dominguez leaped into the air and sat onto his white horse, he lifted the mask on his helmet and looked up. The shiny sword energies in the sky lit up his handsome face and his shiver magic armor. If one paid more attention to him, they would see that this Prince of Zenit, who was always calm and collected, had a concerned expression on his face. Is the situation this terrible? The enemies can move on the territory of the Empire this freely. Dominguez lowered his head and sighed. However, he quickly thought of something, and his expression turned more upbeat. He whipped his horse and dashed toward the gate of the city. He shouted, "Everyone, follow up. We need to leave here by tonight and reach St. Petersburg by tomorrow morning. This is an urgent command. Your Highness, we need to be careful. The situation is already this chaotic, and even Chambord is involved in the war. Wouldn't it be better for us to leave once the king of Chambord finishes this battle?" Someone suggested in the group. "We need to leave right now. Anyone who goes against my order shall be executed on the spot. Even if I have to die, I will die in the capital." As soon as he finished that, Dominguez dashed forward on his horse and disappeared into the darkness. Demonic woman Paris and Redbeard Granello looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. They smiled bitterly, and Granello shouted, "Everyone, follow up. We need to protect His Highness." A series of thunderous clip-clop noises sounded, and more than 20 elite cavaliers immediately followed up with Dominguez. Then, the team moved to the defense wall of Chambord City and was prepared to leave, travel across the river, and join the rest of the envoy group that was residing on the other side of the river. One sword. "You bastard! Get the fuck out here! You traitor!" Standing in midair, Fei suddenly roared at the Xianxia with the war hammer in one of his hands. His loud voice resonated in the sky. "Long time no see, King Alexander." A thin figure appeared at the front of the Xianxia. This man was wearing a set of fancy black and yellow armor, and there seemed to be a cloud of terrifying magic power on it. The double-hand sword on his back was wide, and it looked shiny like a crystal. When watching from afar, it seemed like he was carrying a dash of starlight. He wasn't too tall nor too short, and his long brown hair was fluttering in the wind. There seemed to be redness flashing in his eyes, and it looked terrifying. It seemed like he was an ancient beast that was about to devour humans at any second. Even though his outfit choices changed a lot, and his facial features were slightly altered, Fei could still tell that this man who suddenly appeared was One Sword, the former #1 master amongst the affiliated kingdoms of Zenit and a strong candidate during the Adaptation at St. Petersburg several months ago. It is really you. This is disappointing. Fei observed him carefully and said with a disappointed expression on his face. When Fei first saw that dash of sword energy about 10 minutes ago, he felt like he had seen it somewhere before. At that time, he couldn't be sure. Although the trajectory of the sword energy and the technique used were similar to One Sword's, the sword spirit and energy were completely different. The sword energy and aura were demonic, and One Sword's old aura was filled with loneliness and desolation. However, through the quick battle that just happened, Fei confirmed that this mysterious master was One Sword. This discovery indeed disappointed Fei. Although One Sword stood on the opposite side of the king, he was powerful and proud, upholding the pride and dignity of a true warrior and swordsman. He was a talented genius, and Fei respected him for that for a while. However, in just like less than half a year, One Sword ditched the honor and dignity of a warrior. He didn't just ditch and betray the Zenit Empire that raised him. He even went under the Ormond Empire and led the attack against Zenit with the Xianxia. Even though Fei didn't know what happened in between, the fact that One Sword betrayed his home empire was disappointing and sad. Disappointment? Haha. Why? Isn't my sword sharp enough? As if he was angered by the disdain and mockery on Fei's face. One Sword got mad for a second before laughing out loud arrogantly. Ha ha ha! King of Shambord, what do you know? Now, I'm no longer that loser who was suppressed by you. I'm already a Xianxia lord, and I'm currently a legion commander of the Ormond Empire, which is a level 7 empire. I have many masters under my command, and numerous soldiers take my orders. Ha ha ha! I'm of prestigious status now. Right now, you are only a relatively strong dirty native. It doesn't matter if it is in terms of influence or individual strength, you are no longer my match. How are you qualified to say that? Dirty native? Fei shook his head with a pitiful expression. He immediately thought of something and asked, "It looks like you have completely lost your mind and forgotten your roots. A war suddenly broke out, and Zenit is on the verge of collapse. The Leon Empire and the Ormond Empire came at striking speed and suddenly attacked, and their soldiers crushed through everything and got to St. Petersburg without pushback. It seems like this is all to your credit, right? Huh? You know about that already?" One Sword was slightly surprised, and then he started to laugh arrogantly again. Ha ha ha! Great. Zenit is on the verge of collapse, and St. Petersburg might be even conquered now. Ha ha ha! A sea of blood already formed, and the royal family of Zenit is going to be crushed in a second. King of Shambord, if you kneel and beg me, I will let you live and promote you to a team commander in my swordsman legion. Ha ha! Being the commander of more than 100 people at a level 7 empire is much better than being the king of a little affiliated kingdom. Ha ha ha! What do you say? You are the person who doesn't know anything. Fei said that as he shook his head. He was too tired of saying more. In less than half a year, One Sword was no longer the same person. He no longer had that pride, and he was no longer a desolate and lonely sword genius. Instead, he turned into an arrogant and conceited demon. Dark red flames flashed in his eyes, and it felt like he had turned into an ancient beast that was bloodthirsty. He was no longer calm and thoughtful. Instead, he became easily triggered. He ditched his rusty sword and replaced it with a fancy broadsword, threw away the rough robe and changed to fancy armor. If it weren't for his face, which looked 80% like his former self, he felt completely different in terms of temperament and aura. At this moment, an ear-piercing voice sounded from the command center on the Xianxia, and this person seemed impatient. "General, One Sword, why are you still wasting time with this dirty native? Quickly kill him. Didn't you tell me that there is a rare beauty at Shambord named Angela? I couldn't wait. Kill all the Chambordians and get your revenge. I just need that beauty. Ha. Prince Xianxia, your highness, don't worry. That woman named Angela is all yours." One Sword turned around and replied respectfully. Then he turned back and laughed at Fei provocatively. However, who knew that Fei didn't get mad as he expected. Instead, the king of Shambord looked calm and sympathetic. He said slowly, "Come on, let's do it. You pitiful and despicable traitor. Let me, your former opponent, destroy your pitiful pride and help your fallen soul to be free. Rest in peace." As Fei said that, he looked up, and murderous spirit dashed out of his eyes. "Ha ha ha! Ridiculous. Just you? Just you alone." One sword was enraged by Fei's mockery. This man who was now easily angered opened his Bilodoi eyes wide, and he looked like a demon. Whoosh! The silver sword on his back cried and jumped into his hands on its own, and the body of the sword looked so smooth that it was as reflective as a pond. Bright lights enveloped it, and it seemed like it was filled with spirit. This sword is a high-level combat weapon. Today, I will chop off your head. I will let all the dirty natives of Zenit know that you, the king of Shambord, are only a weak ant. You will never be able to defeat me. Meeting me is the biggest mistake that you made in your life. As one sword shouted, sword energies dashed out. Like brilliant beams of light, they formed a giant energy net, flying at Fei. The king was calm. This time, he didn't back off but instead dashed forward, charging at the net made from powerful sword energies. Immortal King's stone crusher in Fei's hand let out a series of howls as if a wild king was angry, and the mystic runes on the body of the hammer shined as if they were being activated. As if they had lives of their own, lights shot out of them and turned into golden dragons. This was the terrifying phenomenon caused by one of the most powerful barbarian skills. Whirlwind. Boom! 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 The golden dragons and those brilliant sword energies collided, and the golden and silver energies shot in all directions, tearing all kinds of black cracks in the sky and opening paths to the void. Tornadoes appeared one by one, and SPACE was even being destabilized. Like a thin piece of paper, it seemed like it could break at any moment. At this moment, Fei already dashed through the chaotic energy waves and appeared before one sword. Tink, 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 tink. A series of metal colliding noises sounded, and sparks appeared all over the place. In just a split second, Fei and one sword already attacked each other many times, and the Immortal King's Stone Crusher and one sword's sword collided a lot. Their movements were so fast that other people couldn't even catch where they were. Fei already decided to battle one sword close up so that his opponent couldn't shoot out his sword energies. Out of the 7 CLA.S.SES in Diablo World, barbarians were known to be the most proficient close-range combat masters. Their weapons, hands, elbows, knees, almost everything on them and around them could be used to attack their opponents. In this battle, Fei thoroughly demonstrated all that. The war hammer that was about 3 meters long wasn't a burden. Instead, it was really useful in this close-range combat, and it unleashed a level of power that even Fei didn't antic.I.P.8. Every single strike was a crushing blow. Ha ha ha! Great! King of Shambord, do you think you are the only person who is good at close-range combat? You are seeking your death. One sword laughed crazily as he grabbed onto the silver broadsword with both hands. His close-range combat sword techniques were proficient as well. One sword's techniques were completely different from what were popular on the continent right now. To Fei, his techniques felt like they were from the mythical era. Rather than being very delicate and fancy, one sword's sword techniques were simple. They weren't fast, vicious, nor complicated. However, they were effective and the power was stunning when these techniques were connected. When the battle intensified, streaks of dark red energies appeared on one sword, and that forbidden power enveloped him. Tink, 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 tink. The hammer and the sword continued to collide. As if meteors were hitting the earth, every single strike resulted in loud metal colliding and rumbling noises. On the Xianxia, which was really close to the battle, many star-level warriors of the Ormond Empire couldn't even handle the sound waves. Blood dripped out their eyes and ears, and some of them fell off the Xianxia as they staggered. Then, screams resonated in the air. As time said by, the battle reached its climax. By now, one sword had undergone a complete transformation. Like iron, his muscles all bulged up, and his skin turned dark red. His long brown hair was soaked in blood, and his eyes turned completely red as well. He let out a series of hoa.r.s.e roars, and it seemed like he lost his mind and turned into a demon. Fei seemed to have understood something. One sword didn't have a golden finger like the Diablo world, but he was able to go from a peak 6-star warrior to a Sun CLA.S.S lord. It was clear that he used some forbidden-level techniques to achieve this. From the look of it, it seemed like a powerful demon possessed his body. Another soul was living in him. By borrowing the power of this demon, one sword was able to increase his realm quickly. However, as this battle increased in intensity, one sword gradually couldn't suppress this demon inside of him, and he was being demonized. At this moment, one sword was fighting using the demonic instinct rather than his own consciousness. As Fei waved his war hammer, waves of golden energy appeared, and he was able to battle one sword head-on. In fact, he was in a slight upper hand. What is inside one sword? What is this demon? Why do I feel like I have seen this power somewhere before? Fei frowned. This is unexpected. This native is so powerful. On the Xianxia, there was a thin and short young man sitting on a fancy golden chair at the command center under the mainsail. He was pale from the overconsumption of alcohol and LUST, and he looked a little obscene. At the moment, he was surrounded by mighty warriors, and he was enjoying this legendary battle with a mocking smile on his face, as if he were watching a show in the Colosseum. Ha ha ha! Great! Good fight! Did you guys see that? This lowlife one sword sure got lucky and became a legion commander in the Empire, but he is powerful. And this black-haired native is strong as well. Ha ha ha! Capture him for me later. We can send him back to the Empire, and he will be a top-tier gladiator in the Colosseum. Ha ha ha! He laughed arrogantly. This young man was the second prince of Ormond, Xianxia. Your Highness, great idea. These natives are born to be slaves. They should sacrifice their lives for us like ants. This native sure is powerful. Haha, he is also a king, right? He will make a lot of money for your Highness. These natives are strong. After conquering this little town, we will seize all their treasures and women before killing everything. We heard that this town is rich, and their women are the best. Haha, our soldiers can capture all the women, and we will pick out the best for your Highness. I'm sure that your Highness would be able to have a good time. There was a bunch of young men around Xianxia, and they were also in fancy clothes and looked pale and ill. They looked gloomy and weak, but their flattery skills were excellent. In fact, Oleg might even be surprised at their flattering smiles and gestures. Seeing the joyous expression on Prince Xianxia's face, they flattered even harder. Shut up, you bugs. Do you know anything other than flattering? At this moment, a blond and muscular man, who had a blond beard and was fully armored, shouted with anger and disdain. This strong man glanced at these flatterers who were weak and pale, and he shouted, "You trash! What do you know? One sword and this native are both Sun CLS lords. They could kill you over 10,000 times with a finger. Our Ormond Empire was established on cultivation and power, and we look up to powerful masters. Although these natives are of low status, they are still brave and courageous. They are far better than you, just a bunch of wastes. Get the fuck away. Stop trying to blind Xianxia, His Highness." After being scolded by this fully armored strong man, these young men all looked angry and resentful. However, they still closed their mouths and remained silent. It was clear that they were afraid of this person and didn't dare to go against him. Ha ha ha! General Peeth, don't get angry. It doesn't matter how strong they are just a bunch of native lowlives. Since their bloodlines are inferior, they are destined to be slaves. What can they do? Flip this whole thing around? Now, the troops of the Empire are already here, and it will just take a few seconds to conquer the capital of Zenith. In fact, destroy a little town like this is too easy. Even if there are a few powerful natives, they can't do anything. Take one sword, for example. Doesn't he have to put his tail between his legs and listen to my commands? Peeth, you are still too anxious. Even though the strong man's scolding disrupted the mood, This Prince Xianxia who looked unintelligent and useless didn't get angry. Surprisingly, he nodded and put away his joking attitude. A confident and calculated expression flashed on his face which had an obscene smile, and it felt like he had everything under control. After a short pause, Xianxia rested his chin on his palm and said impatiently, "Okay, stop making noises. Let's just watch this performance. These two dirty animals are putting on a great show. Haha, General Peeth, aren't you stuck at peak Moonseal for more than half a year now? Perhaps you will be able to get inspirations from this battle. After these two animals are both severely injured, we can capture them and interrogate them. By then, the Royal Library of Ormond will have 2 more Sunseal's cultivation techniques." The man named Peeth was a little surprised, and a reassuring smile appeared on his face. Then, he slowly nodded and replied in all seriousness, "Xianxia, Your Highness, you were just playing. It is great that Your Highness hasn't been tricked and influenced by these pieces of trash. I, Peeth, swore my loyalty to you." After he said that, he turned around and observed the battle between Fei and One Sword attentively. Gradually, it felt like he was mesmerized by the fight. To anyone who was below Sunseal's, this battle that was happening was a rare opportunity. They are just a bunch of dirty natives, and they are the prey in this game. They are even inferior to beasts. It is fun to tease these dirty animals from time to time. Xianxia sat on his golden chair and didn't pay much attention to the legendary battle that was happening in front of him. He was a little bored, and he frowned and thought about something. Suddenly, he saw old Ariang and Robin who were surrounded by the soldiers on the deck of the Xianxia, and he noticed the throne of chaos that released a shiver energy sphere. Gradually, his eyes brightened up. That fierce battle was continuing in the sky. Fei's power reached a peak, and the golden energy flames expanded in all directions. It felt like there was another sun in the sky. On the war hammer that was in his hands, the golden runes turned red, and they grew even brighter. It seemed like the energies of these runes were about to dash out, and a profound and wild power was about to jump out of the immortal king's stone crusher. Together with Fei's HLL mode barbarian strength, it made the king look like the reincarnation of a battle god. Tink, 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 tink. After numerous loud and terrifying collisions, the battle was about to be over. The high-level combat weapon in One Sword's hands couldn't stand the immortal king's stone crusher anymore. The smooth and reflective surface of the sword was already full of dents, and it looked like a weapon that was still in the making. At the same time, there were cracks in its body. It felt like it was going to shatter at any time. Keek, Kiki. One Sword's eyes were all red, and no human emotions could be seen from it. He turned cold and cruel as if he were a demon beast that had no intelligence, and he let out a series of Hoa.Rdazdi and MUF-fled roars. It seemed like he was in an entirely berserk state. Slowly, that dark red energy enveloped him in the form of mist, and it got thicker and thicker. After a while, his body couldn't be seen in the mist, and only his red eyes shined through. He looked like a terrifying demon. This dark red energy mist contained a lethal power. It was enough to stain souls. However, it was useless against the king. After all, Fei had encountered all kinds of demons in Diablo world from small to big. There were small bosses such as Anariel and Duriel, and he faced off powerful demon lords such as Diablo, Baal, and Mephisto. Therefore, the amount of demonic energy on One Sword wasn't threatening to Fei at all. To put it in simple terms, Fei had already faced the evilest and most demonic creatures in the world. He was already very experienced at fighting against them, and he could be considered an expert. Even though this demonic energy mist was powerful, Fei could ignore it as a HLL-level barbarian. As his golden and majestic energy flames expanded and shined even more, that dark red mist crackled as if it were being evaporated, and it couldn't get within 10 meters of Fei. Fei's golden energy was a natural counter to this demonic energy. Tink! A loud metal colliding noise resonated in the sky, and it was as loud as a mighty thunder. A few tall mountains far away were shattered by the sound waves, and a huge pit was created in the Zuli River, splashing up thick water beams. If there weren't magic arrays protecting the Xianxia and Shamboard city, they would have been turned into dust already. Prince Xianxia, who was calm and calculative, was surprised by this, and the young men who flattered him all shivered. On the other hand, General Peath continued to watch the battle with an intoxicated expression on his face. Boom! Another loud noise sounded, and shiny dots splashed in all directions, as if there were a meteor shower, lighting up the dark sky. This time, the high-level combat weapon in one sword's hand couldn't absorb the shocking power that the immortal King's Stone Crusher unleashed in each strike. After the hammer smashed onto it one last time, it cried and exploded into tens of thousands of pieces. A high-level combat weapon that many masters sought after was completely destroyed. One sword howled continuously like a beast, and he didn't look afraid nor surprised. Without wanting to dodge, he swung his fists and struck at Fei's warhammer directly. With the same expression, Fei smashed his warhammer at one sword mercilessly. This strike was so powerful that it created a loud, rumbling noise in the air. After knowing what was happening in St. Petersburg, he was very disappointed in one sword. He was sure that this former lonely sword genius had fallen into a demon, and this man could no longer control himself. Therefore, he showed no mercy. Just like what he said before this battle, killing one sword might free this man's soul and let him rest in peace. However, a loud, thunderous noise sounded to Fei's surprise. Tink! Fei sensed a very powerful repulsive force from the warhammer, and he almost lost his grip on it. He felt like his hammer didn't land on a pair of fists but instead a vast iron mountain. It was a loud metal colliding noise, and bright sparks appeared at the center of the collision. It was bizarre. After all, even Suncelest's lords couldn't take a strike from the immortal King's Stone Crusher. How was this happening? Fei was stunned, and he took a more careful look. In front of him, one sword already completely lost his mind. His fists were smashed, and all the flesh on his fingers were evaporated. However, his bones weren't white like ordinary people. Instead, they were golden and they were shiny under the moon. All the bones were perfect like art pieces. It was clear that the golden bones were the key to blocking the immortal King's Stone Crusher. Also, Fei noticed that the dark red energy mist was coming out of the golden bones, enveloping one sword's body. Golden bones. A thought flashed through Fei's mind like lightning, and he instantly understood all this. It must be these golden bones that helped one sword improve so much in strength and realm. Even though the golden bones were only lightly exposed after the flesh on one sword's fingers disappeared, Fei felt like he was very familiar to these golden bones. These golden bones instantly reminded Fei of that golden skeleton which was pinned onto the ground beside the mythical altar when Fei first entered that SPACE. That golden skeleton somehow disappeared after Fei pulled out that mysterious half-broken pillar which nailed it there. When I first laid my eyes on it, I felt like there was still life energy inside the skeleton, and it didn't die completely. After I pulled out that stone pillar to purify the world stone on the mythical altar, it somehow disappeared and escaped from the sky castle. What? Could it be that one sword was possessed by that golden skeleton? Wait, that golden skeleton was much larger than one sword's body. Many questions flashed through Fei's mind. While he was wondering about these questions, one sword started snickering. Hee hee. As if he were a beast that couldn't sense pain. One sword licked his lips and dashed at Fei. He punched at Fei, and the golden finger bones curled up and struck at the king with the forbidden power. Cracks in SPC appeared, and the streaks of dark red energy mist looked like dried blood. It seemed like it moved with the wind, and the intense hatred and destruction spirit energy contained in it were able to shatter people's souls. Golden lights dashed out of Fei's eyes, and they looked like golden searchlights. Tink, 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 tink. A series of shocking and terrifying metal colliding noises sounded. The flesh on one sword's arms were completely destroyed, and everything down from his shoulders was gone. The golden arm bones that were enveloped by the flesh were now exposed, and they looked shiny and demonic with more dark red energy mist coming out of them. This pair of arm bones were tough. They were able to directly collide with the immortal King's stone crusher without being broken. As Fei and One Sword battled, more noises and sparks appeared. The real One Sword probably already died by now. It seems like this golden skeleton has its own mind, and it is in control of One Sword's body. What is its goal? Why did it direct this Xianxia of the Ormond Empire to my Chambord city? Fei thought. After considering the overall situation, Fei no longer tried to hold back anything. He waved his warhammer and unleashed the power of the HLL mode barbarian, knocking his opponent more than 100 meters away. Then he reached out his left hand, and an ancient scroll appeared in his hand. He swung the scroll and forced it open, and a series of geodaily runes that were filled with life energy dashed out and enveloped Fei. In the next moment, Fei's power skyrocketed and reached another level. This powerful and ancient scroll was the reward from a quest in Diablo World. After Fei completed the same quest in normal mode and nightmare mode, he got 2 scrolls that were filled with geodaily life energy. They could permanently increase all of Fei's resistance by 10%, and he had saved them for unique situations and emergencies. Finally, Fei felt like today was the day that he had to use one of them, and his overall combat ability increased drastically. When Fei and One Sword went back to battle, Fei was able to suppress his enemy completely. The immortal King's stone crusher was being swung around so fast that it was like a flash of lightning, and the power in it could shatter a mountain. Every time Fei swung it, the red runes that were engraved on its surface left a series of afterimages in the air, powerful enough to harm souls as well. As the battle prolonged, One Sword's golden bone fists had small cracks on them after sparks had been flying around for a while, and they were dented as well. As Fei's power increased, his opponent finally couldn't handle him anymore. As their strikes collided, it seemed like the golden skeleton that was inside One Sword's body was being shaken, and it was almost being hammered out of One Sword's body. Right now, the golden skeleton was at a disadvantage, and it could only be beaten. It couldn't fight back effectively. No, this is the power of a god. You are only a mortal. How can you be capable of such power? Powerful yet angry spirit energy exploded out of the golden skeleton, and it expanded and roared in all directions. Fei was the closest to the golden skeleton, and he was able to interpret the spirit energy and understand what this golden skeleton meant. Tink! This last hammer strike knocked a dash of golden light out of One Sword's body. Just as Fei expected, this dash of golden light was that golden skeleton which was pinned to the ground by that half-broken mysterious stone pillar. The only difference was that the broken bones on the skeleton recovered, and it was complete and shiny. It no longer looked dead like when Fei first discovered it beside the mythical altar. Also, since it completely recovered, the emptiness in its eye sockets was replaced by burning dark red flames. When Fei looked at these 2 clouds of flames, Fei sensed destruction, violence, and a desire for revenge. This golden skeleton stared at Fei with its eyes for a second, and it wasted no time. It easily tore open the SPCE with its injured hand bones, and it dived into the void and disappeared. Fei didn't have time to chase after it. Instead, he sent out a cloud of golden energy and softly lifted the remaining body of One Sword that was falling from the sky. To Fei's surprise, One Sword didn't die yet. He was still somehow alive. Now, One Sword was finally back to his human-like self. Even though his aura was weak, he went back to his former self where he was lonely and desolate, proud and prideful. As he opened his eyes, Fei could tell that the real One Sword was back. He was cold like ice, and no one could mimic this temperament of his. King of Chambord, long time no see, One Sword said slowly with a smile on his face. Seeing this familiar face in front of him, Fei didn't know what to say for a moment. A single slip can cause a lasting sorrow. One Sword's face was filled with desolation and regret. It didn't matter if it were half a year ago when One Sword was still himself or a moment ago when One Sword was that demonic general. Fei never saw this kind of expression on his face. After a short pause, One Sword continued with a bitter smile on his face. King of Chambord, Do you still want to kill me to avenge Zenith? Fei was silent. Slowly, he looked up and asked, "The act of treason, were you the one who decided on it? Or were you controlled by that golden skeleton? Is there a difference?" One Sword looked up at the stars in the sky and said in regret, "Right now, the entire empire knows that the Chaos Era is here, and I, One Sword, am the biggest traitor. I led the united troops that are mainly made up of the Leon Empire and the Ormond Empire and charged into the territory of Zenith, surrounding St. Petersburg. This is already a fact, and the intelligence report at the military headquarters of Zenith already has all this on file. Do you think people will believe the story about the golden skeleton?" Fei's furrowed brows slowly relaxed, and he nodded and said, "I believe you." One Sword was a bit surprised, and he suddenly relaxed as well as he looked at Fei. With a heartwarming smile, he said, "I didn't expect that you, King of Chambord, would be the last person who would believe me. I regret it. I shouldn't have been greedy and signed the agreement with that mysterious golden skeleton. I shouldn't have traded my soul for great power. Did you know? When I went to the Spartax battle zone with Crown Prince Arshavin, I paid attention to all information involving you. When I learned that you advanced into monetization, and your cultivation speed was that fast, I was still blocked by the threshold and couldn't make a breakthrough. That feeling was worse than dying. I started practicing sword techniques when I was able to grasp onto a wooden sword. When the other kids were being spoiled by their parents and playing with their friends, I practiced the sword techniques day and night. When I was growing up, the only thing that was by my side was my sword. I thought I was able to be like Emperor Yadatas.Sin and say that one sword is inferior to no one. For a long time, I was able to say such a thing amongst the young generation. However, I met you during the Compet.I.Tian at St. Petersburg half a year ago. My glory ended. Right now, the flesh on one sword's both arms were all gone, and blood continued to drip down, staining his fancy magic armor. However, it seemed like he didn't notice it. Fei looked at him and said, "Actually, I met you before the Compet.I.Tian at St. Petersburg. Ha! 1 year ago, we met at the peak of the East Mountain of Chambord. During the canonization ceremony, you appeared and helped Elder Princess Xianxia. That was when we met. You are right. I did come to Chambord once before. However, I didn't even pay attention to you at the time, and I didn't even notice you. In just about a year, you became the biggest obstacle in my cultivation path and the darkest shadow on my mind." As One Sword said that, his expression turned even more bitter. After a short pause, he murmured, "From the news that I got in this half a year, I knew that there is no way for me to catch up even if I practice every day and devote my life. In fact, even if I do that, the distance between us will only get bigger and bigger. I felt weak and powerless. When I was desperate, I met that terrifying golden skeleton. In front of the temptation of power, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I know what I did these past few days. Even though I got supreme power, I wasn't able to control myself. The consequence of my mistake is really unrecoverable." After hearing One Sword's story, Fei sighed and didn't know what to say. The former number one young genius of Zenith fell into this state. One could only say that fate was tricky, and the events pushed by it were destined to happen. "King of Chambord, I'm dying soon. Before that, can I ask you for a favor?" After a moment of silence, One Sword looked up and asked with a hopeful expression on his face. "What is it?" "I made a huge mistake this time, and I deserve to die. However, the Xueluan kingdom is innocent. Since I had fought for the empire before, I hope that you could protect the Xueluan kingdom a little and help it preserve its bloodline." The Xueluan kingdom was where One Sword was from. Once the news about One Sword's treasonous actions were known to the public, it would be hated by the citizens of Zenith. As long as the royal family of Zenith got a chance to breathe, the Xueluan kingdom would be torn into pieces by its anger. Since One Sword knew that he made an unrecoverable mistake, he was worried that the royal family of the Xueluan kingdom would be dragged into this. He was a prince of Xueluan after all. Therefore, it felt like One Sword was hoping that Fei could take care of his family. "Okay, Fei nodded earnestly without hesitation. Ha 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 ha. Great. The promises of King Alexander are all kept, and they are more valuable than gold. Now, I can rest assured. One sword laughed after hearing Fei's word, and it felt like his life energy got restored in him. His laughter felt relieved and calm. At this moment, an unbelievable amount of energy appeared on one sword who was weak and dying. Streaks of dark red demonic energy instantly enveloped him, and a series of loud crackling noises sounded. Flesh started to grow out of his shoulders where the injuries were at, and the flesh grew so fast that it felt like vines were being empowered by life energy. In the center of the new flesh, there were strong white bones. In just a second, a brand new pair of arms grew out of his shoulders. As one sword slightly waved his finger, a rusty and old sword dashed into his hand like a meteor. He lightly knocked it with his finger, and the buzzing sounds made by it put a surprised smile on one sword's face. It seemed like he found a rare treasure. Then, one sword's body shook, and a significant amount of energy rushed out, instantly shattering the magic armor and the fancy inner clothes on his body. Now, this man didn't have anything on him. He was completely naked and revealed all his muscles. It is a shame not to be wearing anything, but it is even more shameful to battle in enemies' clothes. I already made a huge mistake, so how could I move around while wearing the things that the enemy gave me? Ha 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 ha. I came to the world like this, and I will die in the same way. As he laughed, a heroic yet brave temperament appeared on one sword, and Fei never saw it before. One sword dashed toward the Xianxia that hadn't left yet and laughed. King of Chambord, let me give you one last gift. As his laughter resonated in the sky, the rusty sword in his hand suddenly shined brightly. Like cutting through a piece of paper, it easily pierced the green energy sphere around the Xianxia. Kill! Many sword energies dashed out of one sword. This man showed no mercy. More than 20 soldiers who charged up were all cut in halves at their waists. The sword energies were so fast that these soldiers didn't realize it until they ran forward for a few more steps. Their upper bodies and lower bodies separated, and they cried in terror. Instantly, a giant pool of blood appeared on the deck.